Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Cinema A to B. Alec, today, got a good one. We're going to discuss Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
Still in theaters.
Yep.
I just saw this today.
Nice.
Yeah. I went to a 12:50 showing and very nice screening. No small children were present. Oh. It was just adults and maybe some teenagers. Everybody was ready to enjoy. But I'll have you kick off your initial impressions on this thing.
So I got to see this in theaters as well. So I went to an 8:00 show on, I believe, a Thursday and had a decent amount of kids, unfortunately. So we had some young ones who were kind of running around, not really their thing. And considering what this is PG-13 as well, which was, interesting. I'm not a huge fan of young kids at the later hours as well as a PG-13 movie. I mean, I want to go there and kind of just escape, and those kind of take me out of it. So my viewing experience was not perfect. Now, I did see this, and it was a good-sized theater, good screen, good image, good sound. Not Atmos, but just, good 7.1 surround from our theater. But it looked gorgeous. I enjoyed it. I walked out pretty happy. I mean, this is the 32nd MCU film now, so it's hard to kind of tell them apart sometimes. I liked it better than the second. I thought it definitely failed compared to the first. My biggest takeaway was the soundtrack, like always. It's banging. James just does a fantastic job of picking tracks for this movie, or whoever picks the tracks. I'm assuming it's James, but whoever's doing it is still absolutely, fantastic. So really enjoyed it. Kind of liked a little bit more focus on Rocket. Story wise, it felt a little overplayed, a little heavy handed in parts. And I did enjoy that it was a smaller scale kind of event. We've kind of talked about this before, right, where MCU has a big thing of like, okay, if this huge galaxy wide or Earth wide event's happening, why isn't the Avengers, or why isn't this happening, or why aren't these people showing up? Like, you should be calling in reinforcements. And this felt very particular why no one else showed up. So I do like that fact. So it definitely was a little bit better in that regard. Other than that, I mean, again, it's an MCU film. I like it it's better than 50% of them, I would think, or whatever. I'd put it right around the middle in my list. Definitely not in the top 10.
I largely agree with you. Mm-hmm. I did like this a lot more than part 2. Mm-hmm. It's a much more serious film than parts 1 or 2. And so when it comes to comparison, I don't know how fair it is to compare them, because part 1's just the funniest entry for me by far. And then part 3 is not, although it still has some humor. A character, unfortunately, that was a source of a lot of humor, which is Star-Lord, is virtually a humorless character in part 3. And I thought they kind of swung the pendulum too far in that direction. But I mean, there's narrative reasons for it, but it's kind of a little off-putting. Like you said, beautiful movie, and it doesn't seem to suffer from what I would say a lot of the MCU movies do, which is just an overabundance of what my eye can tell are CGI backgrounds. It was harder for me to tell where the practical sets started and stopped. I thought everything blended really well. And everything had a good texture to it. They seem to use, I don't know, James Gunn just seems to use a lot more atmosphere and smoke and stuff to kind of hide where the set stopped and where the CG picked up. So love it. I love the look of these movies. I know I've mentioned this to you, and I don't know if it came up when we discussed Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, but there's a real aversion to like color saturation across a lot of the MCU movies. Mm-hmm. And they all have to stay within a similar kind of look for cohesion, but it feels like Gunn kind of pushes the envelope with these to get as much color saturation in the images as he can kind of get away with before Marvel kind of starts to push back. Yeah. So these are always really beautiful looking movies. Now I will say I really only have one big gripe, and it's kind of a gripe I have across pretty much all three movies, is that I love the Guardians of the Galaxy films, but the villains are not particularly compelling in any of them. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this one was no exception. Like I was less impressed with the villain in this for like who he was, but what he was doing was pretty villainous. But the actor I didn't particularly care for.
No. Well, I did feel there was a little bit more pull with this villain to kind of push things along, or why the Guardians were kind of doing everything as opposed to kind of previously. Just, I don't know. I agree with you. Their villains have never been great in the Guardians films. It's always been kind of the balance of the team itself, and kind of having some of that humor lost, especially some characters kind of being not around with the whole group, and you kind of losing that. And then you're, like you said, dealing with some more heavy topics. But then I also felt they missed a couple points where they would tease something that was going to happen, trying to be spoiler free here, but tease something that was going to happen that was kind of like, ooh, we're going to make this bold choice. This is a bold choice. And then they pulled back from it. And that was frustrating, like very, very frustrating. And I understand there's, James can't make some of these decisions. Like this is all kind of done by Disney and by Fahey, and he's kind of making his movie within that realm. But I wish they could have made some of those bolder choices and made this definitely a little, definitely darker, or at least a heavier film than even what it is now. And then I felt the payoff would have been better. It's kind of one of those things like even with like Last Jedi, where they had made a couple of better decisions, that movie would have probably still not been great, but at least been a little bit more bearable,
Yeah, I mean, some of the positives are there are several, at least I would say 3 emotionally charged moments in the movie that largely pay off, and they pay off in the narrative, and then they kind of play to the fan service of the reality that, for a lot of this cast, this is the last time you're going to see them together.
Mm-hmm. One thing I will say too is, I was really happy that James got to do this film, dive a little bit into that whole debacle of things where he got kicked off and they fought for him to come back and finish out. I was really happy that James was able to kind of do that. I wonder what this film would have looked like had he not had that issue and didn't go do Peacemaker, didn't go do Suicide Squad, and kind of slowly become taking over, the DCEU. What would this movie look like then? Like, would it still be in the same slot? Would it have some different stuff? I know they talked about, what I've read, they've talked about the same villain, but would this be changed? So
it's hard to say. I guess when I come out of a movie like this, though, I mean, I don't understand the disdain from, I think it's a vocal minority that Gunn is, co-heading the DCEU. I'm like, well, who else do you want handling this? Like, it's in such a state of disarray. This guy's a proven commodity, and the story beats were there in this movie. I thought it structurally made a lot of sense. It did feel a hair long, but I'm kind of guilty of saying that about most movies. I'm kind of a broken record of, it was about a good 20 minutes too long. That's kind of my shtick, and I don't know if that's really fair with this. I wouldn't say I was 100% engaged from start to finish. There were a couple of places where it started to kind of plod for me. But the final act is excellent. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel like it was super cookie cutter as far as what they were delivering to me. It didn't, some of these MCU movies just feel like just a lot of explanation followed by large action sequence, and then just more diatribe, and then another big action sequence. It's like, it feels very formulaic, and that's not what this was, mainly due to the character Rocket, and I won't spoil what that's all about, but Cooper's something else, man.
Oh yeah. He's fantastic.
Yeah. I felt like he was able to do things with the character that it really, it hadn't been permitted to do parts 1 and 2 for obvious reasons, and then the Avengers films. But you just forget that he's voicing this character, which is I think a credit to him.
So jumping on your point, I think this is definitely has a great potential of having moved the characters forward, or having the characters go through some character building and actually like dealing with some things, and going more so than, like you said, with other MCU films. I mean, it really is just, here's some exposition, here's an action sequence, here's some more exposition to kind of get us moving along, where this is more relationship building or dealing with problems, which was, definitely a breath of fresh air. So I think, again, it didn't hit completely right for me, where I wasn't like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It still felt the trappings of an MCU film, but, with some of that kind of relationship stuff going on. My biggest gripe was I did not like the CGI for Groot at all. Like, there was something about it. It just felt off. It felt like he looks so much better in Guardians 1 than he did in this one, in my opinion. I mean, I know obviously it's a slightly, different look for him, so maybe that threw me, but it felt a lot more fake than even Guardians 1, which was what, 2014 or something.
Yeah. I wonder what would explain that. Maybe the whole process of designing him and implementing him on set was different. I don't know. Because I've got the IMDb up, and I'm seeing this guy named Austin Freeman, and he's listed as on-set Groot. But I thought they had an on-set Groot for the 2014 initial installment too. Because Vin Diesel just voices him. He's not actually on set. But it would make sense that they would have an on-set stand-in to occupy the space for everybody else's performance. By the way, I won't spoil it, but that whole moment at the end with Groot was fantastic. Yeah. Like, fantastic. I was kind of waiting for it. Like, they had kind of hinted towards that in the back half of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? And then they do it. They do it at the perfect moment, and I'm just like, and then yeah. So I'm not. I want to save that one for people that. And
no explanation at all, so you can kind of walk away with your own thoughts and stuff like that.
It was beautiful. Yeah. This movie really tries hard to kind of elevate itself past the genre. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like it's trying too hard, but I could tell there's a lot of effort there of like trying to lift it above just classic MCU action fest, and the way they do it is with the actors and the relationships, and the thing is, though, I couldn't help the fact that Vin Diesel voices Groot, and then just the context of these Guardians movies. I've constantly got his voice in the back of my head. It's all about family.
I live my life 1/4 mile at a time.
Yeah.
The other thing I was surprised at how much the holiday special from Disney Plus actually played in. Like, if you haven't seen this movie and for some reason you're watching us talk about this, make sure you watch the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special before you watch this show. Because I only watched it once, and I thought it was like just a one-off, kind of like, oh, this is a fun little holiday special for Christmas or something like that. Boom, done, whatever. So I watched it, but I don't really remember it too much. And so I'm like, wait, what's going on? Huh? Like, so I'm trying to within the movie, try to remember what happened in the holiday special to catch myself up with what's going on. There are some.
I have a confession to make. I've not seen the holiday special.
Oh, there's a bunch of stuff that is connected directly to the holiday special.
I'm sure there is. But I didn't feel lost.
So maybe it was so that's good that you didn't really feel lost and you didn't miss much. So maybe it was more of a detriment that I didn't that I watched it. So some of this stuff is familiar of where they're at, what they're doing, but yet I don't really remember it because I watched it 6 months ago, during, in December. Now it's June and I'm seeing it.
Even though I didn't see it and you are speaking to it, I appreciate that Gunn would take the time to produce something like that and have it matter.
Yeah.
Right. Because so many of those little offshoot things that it almost feels like the studio's requesting.
Yeah.
And the directors are just, really, we got to do this. And it has no bearing on any other movie or TV series. So that's cool. That means that there's cohesive vision. So hopefully Gunn brings that kind of cohesion to DC, and that everything matters again instead of this shooting from the hip stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't want him to MCU DC, but I think I've never been a huge fan of DC, the DCEU. I didn't think Zack Snyder did a great job of cohesiveness, of telling that story. I think they didn't plan it out as well as Marvel. So hopefully, Gunn has kind of seen the missteps and is kind of starting to make those decisions. Or even take a look at Star Wars, who came so much later and still effed it up because, they weren't able to plan it out or didn't have a story set before they started shooting for all these different things.
The reality, though, is that if we're going to do a little bit of a DC MCU comparison, the reality is that Marvel has got good quality with their character list, but they just crush DC with sheer quantity. Mm-hmm. And DC's just a Batman, Superman, Flash. It's just a 3-legged tentpole. Mm-hmm. And so beyond that, I mean, I guess you have, Wonder Woman, but there just aren't the sheer numbers of interesting characters that Marvel has. And so they're going to have to approach it completely differently. I always
find it funny because DC had the licenses for all their major characters, right? When they created it. So they should have come out strong. Like they had Superman, they had Batman, they had the Flash, whereas Marvel didn't. Sony had Spider-Man, Fox had the X-Men, like their two biggest people. They came out with Iron Man, which if we don't, Iron Man was not a big thing. Like Captain America wasn't a big thing, pre 2008. Like it was. Now they're huge because obviously we got movies about them. They're big things, but they were B, C tier heroes in Marvel. And you even got like Guardians of the Galaxy out here. Like, yeah, you have a following, but they're not a huge following. Like I never read them. I never collected their comics. I didn't really even know about it. So I came in, watching the first one going, I don't care about these characters. I'm going to watch it because it's Marvel, but I don't care. And then absolutely falling in love with them. Like that's kind of one of the things where it's like they're bringing this in where DC is just kind of stumbling about with their main people that everyone has so much buy-in to.
Yeah. And Marvel, to Marvel's credit, they're not content to merely adapt a comic book character or storyline to film. Their attempt seems to be to elevate it. Mm-hmm. Like, let's make this better than the comic.
Or let's pull what we can from the comic and then mix it around so it has the same basic story, but some of the beats may be different, some of the characters may be different, but it tells a better story. Much the way Star Wars should be doing with the legend stuff. I mean, not that I'm going to harp on it again, but I'm going to harp on it.
You're going to harp on it again.
Always, any chance I can. Oh my goodness. Anyways. So
no, this is a really pretty tight, cohesive trilogy that you've got with Guardians now, and I know the part 2 is a little bit maligned, but it's not a bad film at all. It had the unfortunate factor of not being able to meet or exceed expectation, which is just unfortunately all too common with a sequel follow-up, especially a sequel to a movie that I don't think anybody expected to be particularly great. Mm-hmm. And then it is. And so they're like, well, we didn't know anything about it. It came out of nowhere. It's awesome. Surely the second one will be just as incredible. I just, fair or unfair, I think that's kind of audience expectation with stuff like that. And so that helped Volume 3 because you're back down to earth with expectations are now kind of middled. And so I think Volume 3 largely kind of delivered on whatever kind of promise they had.
Yeah.
I certainly enjoyed it. It is a more mature Guardians. I wouldn't be afraid to have my 6-year-old watch Volume 1, but I had no intention of having her watch Volume 3 or 2.
Well,
and I think it's cool that they get kind of more mature as the trilogy progresses. I think that's great.
Oh, it's also got the MCU's first F-bomb, unbleeped, in it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, but it's just also interesting they chose this movie, and it's kind of more mature thing.
I swear, I think they did that just for the marketing.
Yeah.
There's no narrative reason for it. It literally is a really brilliant marketing move. Oh, this is where we're going to break that trend. Yeah, this is kind of the send off for this group, with Bautista and the rest of them. They've had a good run.
They have. I mean, I can understand why Bautista's done. Luckily he was able to wear shirts a lot, or vests at least somewhat, so he didn't have to go through the full body makeup every single day for shooting. So I know that was a big thing. And also he didn't have to be as in great of shape because now he's got, a vest over things and doesn't have to.
Yeah. I mean, he's still in good shape.
Yeah.
He's still a massive human being, but I agree with you. Sitting in the makeup chair
for 6-7 hours and then having to shoot,
Yeah.
For
yeah.
4,
It reminds
5,
me
6.
that, by the way, that reminds me of a hilarious story about Schwarzenegger when he did Batman and Robin.
Oh yeah.
Which was, Schwarzenegger's contract. And I'll link this in why this is pertinent. But during that movie, Schwarzenegger's contract was like, I think he could only work like a 8 or 9 or 10 hour day. And it was like 7 or 8 hours in the makeup chair to play Mr. Freeze. So they literally, they could shoot with him for like an hour. And it was like, why? Because that was his contract, and you couldn't work around it. And so, they spent all this time putting him in that makeup, in that suit, to shoot for like 30 minutes or an hour.
And him just standing around, freeze.
Yeah, getting paid $20 million to freeze. Yeah.
Loud freeze.
Yeah. So I get it, not wanting to sit in the chair. I mean, you do it at the beginning of your career to build your career, but nobody's saying that you need to continue to have to deal with that.
Well, there's a fun tidbit story about Nebula. What's her?
Karen Gillan.
Yeah. Where I guess she's
great, by the way.
Oh yeah, she's fantastic in the role. I mean, she's fantastic in other things that she's done too.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
But she definitely does a great job as a role Nebula in this movie, where she's definitely less of a one-note character than she's been in the other stuff. Not that she was always one note, but she's definitely more three-dimensional in this. But the thing is, where she had scheduled a couples therapy session with her husband and got her days mixed up, and so it was on a day of shooting, so she went to the couples therapy in full Nebula garb and makeup.
Surely she was able to take the contacts out though, right?
Yeah. I mean she was probably dressed in her regular clothes, but just with the Nebula face.
That's hysterical. No, she's tremendous, right?
Yeah.
In everything she's in, and she's kind of known now for Guardians and then the Jumanji movies, but I'm really interested to see what she's got cooking next.
Yeah.
Because I think we've only scratched the surface of what
she's capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just seeing her in these two, I mean, Nebula is obviously a very dark, not evil, obviously, but a much more nuanced evil character as opposed to, how she played in Jumanji and a couple other things. And so she definitely has that range of being able to kind of flop between, being heroic to being kind of villainous and evil and things. And so,
I mean, I think she needs to, book a bunch of roles where she's not having to sit up in the makeup chair as well.
Mm-hmm.
And for her own sanity and just so we get to see, like you said, more nuance to her performance.
Mm-hmm.
And if she could still play a heck of a villain in something, maybe something more conventional, right? Instead of the sci-fi. Hopefully she can bust out of that, because you and I both know it's so easy to get typecast where they're only going to put you in fantasy and comic and adventure movies. But yeah, she's got chops for sure. And so does Bautista too. I think he can do I think he can do kind of whatever he wants.
Oh yeah.
Because he's
already kind of doing that.
He's twice the actor Dwayne Johnson is. And I like The Rock. I got nothing against The Rock, but Bautista's, when I saw him at the beginning of Blade Runner 2049, I knew that guy had more capabilities than I think people wanted to admit as an actor. So
yeah. Well, and he's got other stuff under his belt now too. He's got Dune, so it's like,
oh yeah, we've only scratched the surface with him in Dune. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, he's in demand.
Well, and The Rock plays kind of the Rock and pretty much everything.
That's my problem is kind of a single note.
Yeah.
Traditionally, so.
I mean, I like him, but it's very much The Rock.
But no, I stayed for the entire credits of this. It just never ceases. I've seen, not all, but most of the MCU movies and effects heavy movies, but it just never ceases to amaze me the sheer number of visual effects team it takes to produce these movies. It's astounding. It's astounding. And I counted off, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 VFX houses. I mean, you had your big ones. You had Weta Digital. You had like Frame Store. You had like a smaller contribution from Industrial Light and Magic, and Sony had their own internal animation and rendering department. It just blows my mind, and it's every frame is visible that they didn't spare any expense when it comes to the visual effects in this movie. My only thing is I just sometimes I get a little numb to the on-screen destruction. Like
it doesn't feel you because your brain's telling you that it's fake, or I mean obviously it's a movie, it's fake, but it's just computer graphics and kind of
we've been inundated with so much of this since they started this run in 0809 with Iron Man.
Even get to the point where you're just blowing things up, where we've lost any kind of sense of semblance of when you start blowing up full cities and, doing stuff like that. Like most of us have no point of reference. We can't even fathom what that would feel like to really kind of garner anything. Or like if you're talking about blowing up planets or things of that sort, it's like, okay. I can maybe imagine it, but I have nothing to pull from.
Yeah. My favorite moments in this movie is when it went really pretty small. Mm-hmm. And we've had that conversation before about going more micro with these sequels, and those were the intimate moments where Guardians 3 went micro is where I felt like it was cooking the best. Mm-hmm. And then when I guess they felt like it had to have the big villain, big baddie backdrop destruction to kind of make it feel like a worthy third installment, but that wasn't what held most of my interest. Any last words before we wrap this one up?
No, just enjoyable. Again, I'm going to just harp on Bradley Cooper did a fantastic job. I think a lot of nuance. I'm glad James Gunn was able to finish it out, and look forward to seeing what he's doing with DC. But also interested to see what happens with the next Guardians and who takes over the reins and how they change things up. Yeah. I mean, it's a good gig for Mr. Cooper. Mm-hmm. Sitting in the plush VO booth. Oh yeah. So, but he definitely brings it, and I appreciate seeing kind of the behind the scenes footage when these folks are into character on screen, and I've seen some of the footage of Bradley Cooper playing Rocket, and he's definitely gets fully into it. He does. Yeah, so, and it shows. Well, I again always appreciate everybody catching us on another episode of Cinema A to B. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, please. Hit that subscribe. But you got to hit the bell because YouTube changed how they serve these videos, and subscribing to the channel is just not going to cut it because you're not going to get good notification that we've dropped another episode. So you're just going to have to dig deep, hit the bell. And you can stay up to date on any of the social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok.
TikTok. And yeah, we appreciate you. Alex just all about the TikToks now.
TikTok. No.
Because he didn't have to manage it. So
I don't. That's the nice thing.
Yeah. All right, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.